Morning, everyone, and welcome to the webinar Journal Backstage, preparing your research paper. This is a webinar that we are very glad to hold here at Balas, continuing with the webinars we started last year. We had 3 webinars last year. This is the first webinar that we have for this year. As the title suggests, this is about research papers. Last year we had 2 on teaching cases, how to write them and how to use them in class. And we're going to have 2 more later this year. But now we have this webinar dedicated to research papers. And the speaker, we're very glad to have Nestor Salcedo as the speaker for today's seminar. He's the former editor-in-chief of the Journal of Economics, Finance, and Administrative Science. This is one of the collaborating journals that we have in Balas. And usually the best papers in Balas are invited to go through the review process at this very important journal. So I'm going to offer a brief introduction of Nestor. He will make a presentation, and then we will have time for a Q&A session. Nestor Salcedo is postdoctoral researcher at ESADE. He's an adjunct professor at ESAN in Lima, Peru. He is a PhD in economics, management, and organization from Universitat Autónoma de Barcelona. And as I said, he's the former editor-in-chief of the Journal of Economics, Finance, and Administrative Science. Nestor is also the current communication chair at Balas since late last year. He has been doing a tremendous job in that position. He has been helping a lot. And so we're going to start the presentation, and we also would like to thank IESA for providing the technical support for this webinar. So please, Nestor, if you can start your presentation. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much, Urbi. This is my first time here with this kind of presentation, and well, my intention is to show the backstage of the journal, to be available to prepare the papers to the submission, the normal submission. Normally, we obviously developed previously the different kind of activity of achievement related to the preparation of the working paper, no? And even though, for example, we follow a different kind of program related to that, no? The doctoral programs or the master research programs and so on, to dedicated to the develop of the paper. No, we have this kind of experience to develop the literature review, to focus in the research goals and so on, and the different kind of structure, normally in empirical structures, in other cases related to the quantitative methods or qualitative methods and so on. But my intention is to go to the next steps. What happened with I need to prepare my paper and I need to start my submission, no? And this case is a very special step. It's a very special step because depending of my goal that I want to achieve related to my scope, and the other part is related to the journal. And in my case, my intention is to provide you what happened with the other part regarding to our journal. In this case, the Jeffers. Okay, let me show you in general the presentation that I have related to this aspect. Normally, let me check that. Yes, I don't know if the presentation
we can see. We can see.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, perfect. Okay, let's start. Normally, when we develop it, the first step is to check what happened with the journal. Normally, we go to for example, we have a different tools to, for example, to check or to search what is the best journal that fit with my paper. And this is very important to see because when we develop different kind of papers, depending of our scope of our field, we need to check, for example, in some web page related with normally with the rankings of journals. Normally, for example, Simago journal rank or the GCR web page show you, for example, depending of the categories or depending of the fields, what is the best journal that fit with you. This is the first part. We need to check these kind of things. Normally, if we go to other kind of, for example, references to this kind of ranking, more regional, for example, Cielo is another kind of ranking, or other, for example, Dialnet, or if we want to, for example, check what kind of journal we have regarding of first of all, the region that we have the information that we want to show, and for the other part, the scope and the ranking regarding to the indexation of our journal. Other kind of ranking that we have is the DOA, for example, the directory of open access journals. This is one of the most interesting, for example, list that I mentioned for like a suggestion, because normally the DOA ranking show you for information that is more related to the open access journal. This kind of open access journal is a very important open access journal that is ranked obviously in other kind of indexation like an Scopus or Simago, or in other cases the Web of Science. The DOA list an interesting journals that is an open access. In one of the in other part, for example, you don't need to pay fees, for example, for revision, because in other situation when you hear about of open access journal is related for example, what kind of fees I need to pay for the process or the editorial process and so on. No, in that cases, when you check in this kind of list, you obtain information regarding to this kind of journal that is not necessary to pay fees. That is more important because it's sponsored for the institution that provided this journal, like an open access. In this case, for example, JEFAS is one of these kind of open access journal. JEFAS is an open access journal, is indexed in Scopus, and is indexed recently in Web of Science. But all the fees are practically paid because ESAN Graduate School of Business pay for all of these fees, because finally the objective of this institution is to sharing the knowledge in the region and in the worldwide. And in that cases, this institution provide this sponsor regarding to these fees. Returning to JEFAS. In the case of JEFAS, we have a different kind of aspect that we need to know, that if I check, for example, in my case, I identified in the Simago journal rank or the GCR what happened with my category. In my case, for example, I am in the categories of economics, econometrics, finance, or in some cases, some aspect related to the administrative science, more related to the business economics, or more related with, for example, managerial paper, but with an interesting, for example, theoretical part in economics area. Well, I check in these categories, and I identify JEFAS in this kind of rankings. Okay, JEFAS have a history and a timeline of developments. Similar to JEFAS, you identify with other kind of journals this kind of timeline. It's very important to see what happened with the history of the different kind of journals, because depending on these journals, you identify that this journal in the future will be a good or a interesting journal for example, for your future paper. Because normally in the submission, if I want to achieve the maximum Q1, probably in the maximum Q1, you need a lot of effort, a lot of time, and a lot of, for example, an interesting co-author that you need to achieve these kind of aspects, because it's not easy. It's not the easy way. But if you see, for example, regarding to this ranking of the SGR or JCER, this kind of Simago, Web of Science, and so on, you identify, for example, in the middle, in the last part of the first quartile, in your categories, some kind of journals that probably have an interesting achievement in the recent years, even though in the Q2, for example, in the second quarter, with interesting, for example, achievement in the years, that depending of the timeline, probably you identify that in the next steps or in the next years will be an a Q1 or a strong Q1. In that cases, you have an interesting opportunity to present or you submit your paper. You identify what happened with this kind of timeline. This is one of my recommendations. Sometimes you identify these kind of things, and this is a good way to start it. For example, if we are an early researcher, or if we are a researcher that we want to, for example, to achieve a little more publication with a different kind of portfolio of publication for the community. And this is normal because you identify these kind of things, for example, like an Aterna, for 3 journals, 4 journals probably, in some cases, depending on you categorize, I identify, okay, I have my first option, my second option, and my third option, depending on my submission and the editor process that I develop. Okay, in the case of Jeffas, the Jeffas have a history that probably practically has 30 years since the beginning with the Sun, like an Cuadernos de Difusión. Cuadernos de Difusión practically was founded in 1992, and after that, the name renamed to the Journal of Economic Finance and Administrative Science in 2009, and in this moment, it started with the indexation in the regional way. For example, with Cielo, after that with Scopus, and after with Scopus, well, the idea was to achieve a good structure, a good requirements, and a good process with a the peer review process, with double-blind peer review process. And after that, we achieved the other kind of requirements that was practically necessary to apply for the Web of Science. When I followed the managing of the editorial, we need to achieve all of these requirements to practically apply to the next or last process with the Web of Science. Was very interesting because we needed to develop an interesting strategy, international strategy, and to connect it with a different kind of community that we have in the region. And this is the other part. When you work in the different kind of research according of your categories or your topic or your field, my recommendation is don't develop the things alone. You need to create an ecosystem with co-authors, with interesting co-authors, with similar responsibilities to achieve the same goal. Because this kind of community is necessary to create to increase the possibilities to develop a good publication. And for the other part, to develop a good ecosystem for our region. This is probably the mind of this, the main secret, for example, from North America. In the case of US, on the case of Canada, or in the relation with Europe, the ecosystem that is created according to the co-author and the fields or topics are very important, because this connection allow to develop a good publication that finally is published in a good journal. And this is, for example, in Asia, developed the same way. And the idea is to increase and to improve the same ideas in Latin America. Okay, to continue with that, Jeffas developed these kind of indexations, and after that, create another kind of signals that is very important in the case of the journals to present to the authors. What kind of signals, apart from the indexations? To be, for example, in a different kind of platform, for another kind of platform for databases, or another kind of searching databases, in the case of a Google Scholar, or in the case of the list of DOAG, or the other kind, in the case of, for example, of the economic way, REPEC platforms, or other ecosystems, for example, the economic system for another kind of library, and so on. Well, The other part is to recognize with the journal what is the scope, what is the goal of the journal. Because the intention is, okay, if my journal is in Latin America, I need to check on a journal of Latin America and I apply that. Not necessarily. You need to check, for example, what is the field, what is the scope, what is the category, and what kind of paper received this kind of journal. Because normally, depending of the history of this journal, the journal probably only accept empirical papers, or only accept qualitative papers, or only accept theoretical papers. You need to check. Normally, it's not is and sometimes when the journal is increasing in the rankings, probably accept a different kind of portfolio of methodological papers in a different kind of way, or different kind of paper types. But when in the moment when the journal increase and rank in the most important quartile, is more focused in the methodological aspects and in the case of type of journal of paper. And you need to check these kind of things. In our case, for example, we need to rewrite the scope because we want to, for example, achieve a good quartile. And if we want to go on a good quartile, we need to be more filtered or more focused in these kind of aspects. And in that case, for example, this is our aim and scope. No, we have an outstanding high quality peer-reviewed research in business and economy related to economics, econometrics, finance for contributing to the academic community, policymakers, and management practices. When we developed this kind of aspects, we included one of the most important point and section in our papers, the discussion section. Previously, we, how can I say, the importance of the discussion section it was not the main point. But after this scope, the discussion section established a main aspect of our papers that we recognize to start, even though the process of the editorial process in the journal. Why? Because in the discussion section, we develop the theoretical implications and the policy and managerial implications and the future lines of the agenda. This kind of aspect was very, very important issue that we recognize in other kind of journals in the Q1 rankings. For example, Academy of Management have a discussion section that is very important to establish the implications. And this implication, one of the most important discussion around the world was what happened with this paper that practically is finished, and we need to explain what is the practical bias that we implement. For example, if we develop it in economic areas, or if we develop in managerial areas, what is the managerial implication of this kind of aspect? And in the other part, if we develop an important literature review that we contribute like in a regional area, what happened with the theoretical implication that was supposed? In these aspects, this discussion section was very important to implement after this new rewrite of this scope, no, for the academic community, policymakers, and management practices. The other way is to be focused in the red words, no, econometrics, and finance. But fortunately, for example, this is the categories of Scopus. But when we apply to, for example, to the Web of Science accepts economics and business topics. And with that, we spread a little more the aspect regarding to the, okay, we accept the administrative science, like a managerial aspects, but with a focus with a theoretical economic theories or reinforced with theoretical aspect regarding to the economics areas. And we practically develop a match with these aspects. The other is rigorous theoretical and empirical implication that is more related with the theoretical implication and managerial and policy implications. Obviously, after the the refocus in the strategy, we needed to be more filtered in the case of the paper type, and in that cases, we don't accept case studies, for example, more related with the confusion of the teaching cases discussion, no, and this kind of documents, and the other cases, the case studies like a methodology. Yeah, normally, several years ago, we accept this type of paper, but unfortunately, the confused regarding to the type of paper, because some authors submit teaching cases like papers with methodology of case studies, was very confusing. And in other cases, for example, other authors apply like a paper with case study, like a methodology, but like a section of teaching cases. And this kind of confuse was very complicated to manage in the editorial part. And finally, we decide, okay, this is a very complex, because the authors don't recognize what is the real type of this kind of documents. And for the other part, we have a lot of bureaucracy to achieve a good filter of this kind of type. Finally, we don't accept this kind of paper. Only we focus in the empirical papers that is more focused in the econometric discussions or an economical, even though multivariate analysis, and we develop these kind of things. More empirical, not theoretical completely, no qualitative in the main way, more empirical, more with a focus of quantitative areas. These kind of things is very important. If you see this kind of aspect that I explained, it's very important to see with every journal that you check, like your portfolio of probably future journals that you want to apply. The other is, well, in our case, we also appreciate when the research are focused in the Latin American or Ibero-American context. This is one of the main issues that we, for example, bring to the author like a signal. Even though when we accept, for example, another other kind of paper related to Asian authors or for other areas, we accept if in the cases that has an interesting comparisons or interesting connection with our region. For example, in the case of I remember that in some cases we have a different authors with submission from India or China, or in other cases with South Africa. But in this case, the very interesting topic of the author was connected with the BRICS. And with this connection, we accepted the possibility to, for example, to apply and to start with a review process. The other aspect, for example, if you connected with another kind of communities, no, Asia Pacific Alliance, or the other kind of connection and commercial or trade agreements that is developed between the regions and so on. And this is very interesting because connected the different kind of new aspect that we need to see for the contribution, for example, between the regions. The others is to see that is accepted if you are an author in the normally with a doctoral degree, but in other cases, you need to check if the journal accepts a doctoral candidate like an author or early stage researchers. Sometimes when some journals are in the top of the quartile are more specific in these cases and talk about of the author need to be a doctoral degree career with affiliation, with a tenure affiliations and so on. And you need to check this kind of thing because normally sometimes we didn't see this kind of aspect, and when we finish the submission, practically return in short term and a death rejection, no? And we don't know why. And sometimes these kind of things is related with this kind of details. Another aspect is you need to check the frequency and the periodicity of your journal. Normally, sometimes some journals have a long periodicity. In our case, the minimum of the periodicity that is on a good indexed journal need 2 issues per year. If you recognize that the journal have a minimum of 2 issues per year, yeah, this is a good signal that this journal is an indexed journal with an interesting and minimum and normative periodicity that they need. In other cases, you have another kind of periodicities, no? 3 times in a year, 4 times in a year. Yeah, probably you have more possibilities to apply and receive an interesting review, and after the interesting review, you probably have a good acceptance depending on the quality of your paper. Yeah, but you need to check if the periodicity is not an excess, because this is the other side. If you identify that you have a journal that probably have an incredible and practically unbelievable periodicity, for example, for more than 6 or 8 issues per year, and probably after these 8 issues per year, you have another kind of special issues, and a part of the special issues, you receive another kind of a calls. Yeah, wait a minute. Probably this journal or have a strong support. Think about it. You need editorial teams, reviewers. A part of the reviewers, you need the proofreading, for example, areas. Another kind of topic that is more related to the backstage. Yeah, if you identify this kind of journal with a lot of issues and a lot of special issues, and a part to this, another kind of goals, yeah, probably this is not a good journal, because probably this kind of journal, even though in some cases ask for a payment to pass quickly, and in these cases probably you face a predatory journal, and this is not a good way. Okay, for that you need to check what happened with this kind of journals. You have a journal according to the scope, according to the goal, according to the periodicity, according to the type of paper that received, according to the aspect regarding to the regional, the region issues, or another kind of a context that you is more interested for this journal. And after that, the other details, if the language, for example, in some cases, some other kind of journal accept in not only in English, also in Spanish, or also in Portuguese. No, for example, depending on our region, we have in interesting region that we have a different kind of journal that accept in these kind of languages. And other cases is only in English. For example, in our case, because we work with Emerald, and apart to this, we accepted in this categories that to achieve the Web of Science or to scale in the next steps of the quartile, okay, to be more, we more focused in the case of the languages that we accepted practically in English, and in these cases in the British English, because it's more connected with our publishing, that is Emerald, that is located in UK. And the other is, well, we are an open access, and the fee is covered completely. No, in our case, the fee is covered completely. You identify in other cases, for example, if you go to other kind of open access journal, the fee is covered completely depending on the institution that support them. No, what is important to identify these kind of things, this connection between the fee covered and the open access journal, because if the fee is covered with institution, you don't have any kind of interest conflict, first of all. And the second part, you have the possibility, like an open access, to publish in every social media or every place or site that you want, because the open access allows you the possibility to practically to share your publication in every site. This is different, for example, it's not an open access journal. It is not open access journal. Practically, you depend of the publishing, and you depend of the journal, and you depend of the database that is cited or show this kind of journal. No, it's with a licensed access to your paper. You need to identify these kind of things. No, what is the most convenient for you? You want to be more cited. Probably you want to you want to show more your paper. You have the possibility to put after the publication in a different other places to share your knowledge or to share your publication. The open access is a good option for you. Well, this is more for JFAS and JFAS. One of the other situations that you need to check regarding to the backstage of the journal is that, okay, apart to the normal Scopus, Cielo, or Web of Science indexations, what is the other kind of databases or indexation that the journal has? Probably if you are in a first quartile, probably it's in a good quartile, that journal have a different kind of achievement with a different kind of databases and other kind of indexation. But you need to check that is a very strong support that this kind of journal has. Because depending of that, you have a most important signals to be cited. And what is finally, what is the most important issue regarding to your publication? That other researchers or other kind of authors or other kind of reviewers check your paper. And finally, other interesting people cited your paper. Cite your paper. And in that cases, you need to check if this journal is very convenient for you. It's convenient for you regarding to this kind of databases or these platforms or this kind of indexations, more about of the most common or more knowledge. For example, in the case of Scopus or Web of Science, you have another kind of platform that you, for example, bring a new kind of branch regarding to your scope. This is another option that you need to check. Well, the other is it's normal to be or to develop a benchmarking regarding to that. No, for example, when we developed this kind of editorial management according to the journal, we needed to check what happened with the regional area and what happened with the improvement and what happened with the categories that the other journals in the region, for example, achieve. And in these cases, well, we developed, okay, what is the most important journal that we need to develop a benchmarking for us. No, in our cases, we check with the emerald journals that we have a regional emerald journals, and we have a most important three journals: the management research, the academia that is in the ARLA, the CLADEA, and the other is the JEFAS. And the intention was to see, okay, what kind of different aspects of variable is it very important to achieve the signals for the authors and the signal for the new researchers to be interested in the journal. No, and in that cases, we identify, okay, what is the institution that support our journals? This is very important for the authors and very important for the researchers. The other is, what kind of conferences are related with this journal? What kind of affiliation, no? This journal developed or agreement with other kind of conferences or regional conferences or international conferences. The other is the history that I told about that. What is the history of this journal? What is the connection with the publisher? What is the institution that support that? The other is the field or the principal categories that developed this journal. The journal developed a focused categories or practically explode on a lot of categories. This is the other side, because according to the best practices, the best way is to be more specific in the categories or in the field, because it's more connected with the interest of the authors and the interest of the readers and the interest of the researchers. Because if you explode on a lot of categories, the problem probably is that is with a lot of categories, not all the categories achieve a good quartile. And probably one of these quartile, it is low, like an anchor, fell down the journal. And you need to be curious and need to be a little more special with this kind of manage of these aspects. The other is obviously what happened with the indexation, the ranking of the indexation. What is the quartile that every year achieves the journal? And the other is related to the previous one. What is the other databases or the most important indexation that is the journal has? In the case of Jeffas, when we talk about of the aspect regarding to the connection, for example, with a regional area, we need to improve the signals, for example, for the Latin American researchers and the Latin American authors. And in that cases, well, we need to develop a more improvements, for example, to achieve a good signals to the researchers in the region. Even though Jeff has developed in parallel an attractive signal for the Asian researchers, and the Asian researchers also send or submit your papers to the journal. But we need to be more specified in the scope and to and to be focused, for example, in the aspect regarding to the scope, no? To ask, okay, you are from other regions, and what connection we have with our region? No, because it's very important for us, because our journal is from this region. Okay, we want to achieve an interesting aspect regarding to the worldwide, but we serve to our region. And the intention is to, if we have an interesting investigation regarding to the other region, the idea is to connect it with our region. Okay, this kind of aspects was very important for us because connected with a different kind of achievement regarding to the quartile that we achieved since our country in the regional area, even though we started with Cielo, and until now we are with Cielo, and after to Cielo we have with Simago and Scopus, and well, and to the worldwide we are in the categories of econometrics and finance in a good way. Okay, the other is to see what happened with the site score. The site score of the or in the case of Web of Science is the journal indicator factor, impact factor. No, normally we talk about an impact factor. What about the impact factor? Well, the impact factor is similar to the site score, but it's in a combination between the Web of Science and Scopus. In the case of Scopus, we have the site score. In the case of Web of Science, we have the impact factor. And finally, this is a metric, it's an index that practically you identify what is the quantity of citations that the paper received in this journal according to the special kind of period of time. For example, in the last 3 years, what happened with the new publications and the quantity of citations that was developed in these years. And according to that, developing a little formula that established, in the case of site score, maybe it's in 4 years, in the case of Web of Science, 3 years, but you have an interesting, for example, scope that, okay, what is important in the case of this kind of journal that is interesting for me or not? The people cite these kind of papers. I have the possibility to be cited. Well, we have, with the previous variables that we identified, that is an open access, and have another kind of signal regarding to the databases that have the possibility to be, if I develop it in a publication, have the option to be cited and to be more shared this kind of publication for me and for other colleagues. This is important. Well, you have this kind of aspect, for example, to you. The other is the international collaboration. The international collaboration that I told in the beginning is similar to, okay, probably this journal have an international collaboration because have a different kind of co-authors regarding to the paper. Probably it's a good signal for me that if I develop it and a good publication in the future with a good submission in a journal, that identify what kind of co-authors are in this kind of ecosystem. Related journal and ecosystem. And probably this kind of ecosystem have a similar kind of co-authors that have an interesting field similar to you. And probably this is another aspect that you need to achieve. Others, Well, this is in general, this is the data science, this is the web of science, the application that developed with journal, and the other is regarding to the searching, no? For example, this is an interesting web page that you identify the history of the journal and the like a profile of the journal regarding to the web of science, the master journal list. If you have the access to the master journal list, if you have, for example, some question regarding to the analysis of journal that probably you said, okay, this journal is in the web of science, or probably this journal is an emerging citation index, like an indexation, new indexation in the web of science. How many years has in this kind of categorized? You put the name of the journal in this kind of web page, the master journal list, and you identify exactly what happened with the history of this journal. Probably this journal show, for example, to the public that it's a web of science journal, but probably is indexed in the emerging side. No, it's an emerging, but how many years hasn't this kind of indexation like an emerging? 1 year, 2 years, is waiting for the next step, like an next indexation, or having a lot of time with emerging and don't up to the next stage, like for example, ECCI, no? This is the master journal list. In other cases, you check the journal and probably don't show you this information on the journal. In this case, this journal is not in Web of Science. This is in the case of in JEFAS. If you identify it, you have the information about that. The other is in the Scopus. In similar way, I told about of the Simago journal rank and the Scopus, and you check regarding to the Scopus, the category that you need, and the categories of the journal that you identify. For example, on open access or non-open access, or in the categories of economics or management and so on. And you, according to that, identify the journal. If you check the journal, you check the profile of the journal, and you see what is the story, the history of this journal. What is the site score? What is, in this case, explain with more detail what happened with the kind of citation regarding to the quantity of documents that has in the last years. And according to that, the tracking of the site score is shown for you. And even though the other information is what happened with the last year that obtained some kind of score, and the other is what happened with the next score month by month, that you practically see the movement of this journal. This journal is good, is in a good way, show to the rest of the readers or the researchers the information that, for example, is interesting for others to cite, and so on. For example, in the case of JEFAS, we have an interesting journals like a colleague that cite us. For example, one of the most interesting journals that cite us is the resource policy. Resource policy is on most of the important journal, for example, in the case of macroeconomic or economics policies, and have an important impact factor of side score, but it's one of the most interesting journal, practically, that the co-authors and authors cite us, like a HEFAS. The other is the Cohens in economics and finance, the Cohens in business and management, and the other is the Journal of Economics. The other side is to identify the journals in what other platforms. For example, I told about one of the most important searching or platform to searching is the Google Scholar, no, for the different kind of authors or researchers. Well, we developed our platform of JEFAS in the Google Scholar. And if you go to JEFAS in Google Scholar, you identify what happened with all of papers, and if you want to check every paper that we have since the foundation in 1992, you practically have the access completely. The other is, if you want to check what happened with the papers or the previous papers, if you want to use like a reference, because this is the other part. When you develop a paper to submit in a journal, it's important to recognize the scope, the aim of the journal that you want to submit, the requirements, and the other part is why you decide for this journal. Is this journal is in your scope? Is this journal is in your in the requirements that you identify your focus in your field? Probably this journal has some previous publications that probably is necessary to reference in your paper. You need to check that because sometimes, like a good suggestion, is to develop this and a good alignment regarding to these kind of things. Because regarding to these previous references that you identify in the publication of this kind of journal that is in your scope, probably you develop a continuation of your new publication for this journal. Accept like a good practice. Probably is not in all the cases, but it's normal to check these kind of things. For that, it's very important to see that this journal have the database internally, that you have the access to the previous papers to check what kind of paper probably is a good reference, like a fit with your aspect that you want to achieve.
Nestor, 5 minutes, please.
Oh, sorry. This
Yeah,
is just
5 minutes.
last slides. And this is the other part, no? The backstage of the process is identify that you have in the core process, directly to the core process. Submission, pre-acceptance, double-blind peer review, and post-acceptance. And according to that, I share with Balas this presentation, even though you need to, obviously, for example, in the case of Emerald, to prepare for the submission, the different kind of aspect. No, your paper is important, very, very important, the cover letter. Normally, some authors forget the cover letter, and the cover letter is the important paper, the main page that you present your paper, you present your title, and you probably present even though the suggestions of some reviewers that probably you want to be or you want to, for example, to the editor register like a collection of reviewer that has, and to even though this kind of information fit the database of reviewers. Sometimes the editor have this kind of lag. In different kind of discussion with editors, the main issue was, okay, we need a lot of reviewers, and this is very important. The other is, well, the EO checklist is the most important point that you need to achieve all the requirements for the submission, and according to that, check with the editor that is accepted to confirm the pass to the reviewer process. And in the case of the reviewer process, you need to check normally 4 steps. The reviewer selection, according to the editor, the reviewer invitation, the assignment, that is the reviewer accept or not to review your paper, and finally the score. This is very important step because according to that, you check in the visualization of the submission, what is the step and you are. No, and probably in sometimes you feel sad sometimes because the time is more than you think about of the process. And in that case, you need to check what is the moment that you stay in what step, and probably you need to ask to the editor what happened with the next step. It's not it's not a bad decision. Normally, sometimes the authors ask to the editor, okay, what is the next step? What happened with this? If I needed to, for example, the previous suggestion that I told about you, that probably needed to be more clear for these steps. And according to that, the editors check the final part of the process. And finally, the post-acceptance is the other kind of requirement that you need when you finally receive the acceptance decisions. No, that probably with the proofreading, the details of typos, and when you develop the final publication like a PDF and so on. Well, to finish, normally to successful extractor, when I told about OBJEFAS, you have 6 parts. Introduction, literature review, methodology, results, the new part that is very important, discussion section, and the conclusion. What see the reviewers? Normally the reviewers in the part of the platform of review see the originality of your paper, the relationship to the literature, and a good methodology, What happened with this alignment regarding to the results, regarding to the discussion, the practically and the research implication, and finally, the quality of communication. My recommendation, when you finish your paper, pass for approved reading with the professionals to see the technical writing of your paper. Normally, even though the native speakers need them. Why not our region? Okay? And with that, you have the different information regarding of the ecosystem. For example, you are connected with a conference, international conference, that is very important to improve your paper. What is the connection with the editors in the meet to editors, for example, in the conferences? The other is what kind of journal are in the region or in your scope. What is the connection with the university or other kind of researchers or co-authors? And if you, for example, participate like a reviewer, that is very important. Okay, and with that, the other slides I share with the community in general, but this is the main part that I want to explain. Thank you, Uri.
Thank you very much, Nestor. That was really a great presentation, a lot of information, and so it's. I mean, I have to say that I've seen the progress of Jeffas throughout the years, and I'm sure you have been a very important part of that progress, and you're responsible for that in a good part, I'm sure of that. And and congratulations for the presentation. I have a question here. So a colleague of mine sent me through the WhatsApp, not through the, but he asks, do you do bibliometric analysis? Do you accept, sorry, bibliometric analysis in the journal?
This is a good question. We have a discussion in the editorial team in the beginning that I started, and we need to see what was the best way to develop a bibliometric paper. No, fortunately, we identified an interesting paper types that develop a strong and very deeply bibliometric papers that establish step by step, like a quantitative and a methodological aspects, what is the best way to conduct an interesting systematic literature review regarding to the bibliometric analysis and with a proposition in the final report. Even though if you, for example, search, we compared or we developed an interesting benchmarking with a good journals only dedicated to the systematic literature review and a bibliometric analysis that we need to take like a good example in a good practice to conduct it, for example, for journal. And in that sense, we accept the submission of this kind of paper, only that if achieve like a requirements, this kind of aspects, no, to achieve this a deeply structured like a systematic literature review regarding to the bibliometric analysis.
Thank you. And the other question is, do you have special issues?
This is another interesting question that we recently we discussed in the editorial team. What happened? Some years ago, in the 2018, developed a special issue, but unfortunately, the coordination to develop this special issue was very complex in this moment. And when we talk after that with Emerald, the idea was to establish probably a good structure that developed an important signal to the market, in that case, of our region, that probably the special issue will be a strong and systematic special issue for the next of the year. For example, every 2 years, a special issue that we need to develop in the Latin American area with a specific kind of characteristics. And with that, we establish the preparations of this strategy to develop. Probably in the next year, we send this kind of a new release.
Thank you. We have, in the chat on YouTube, we have many professors, many colleagues, Osvaldo Felizola, Sigrid Hagel, Yvonne Huertas, Ernesto Blanco, Caterina Koschel, Eduardo Pablo, Yvonne Huertas. Eduardo Pablo asks, is there any reason that justifies the use of British English? It's because of Emerald, no? Which is British, basically.
Yeah, this is one of the connection with the publisher. When we developed an ASOM agreement to accelerate the process, I remember that we needed to, for example, to be more aligned with the process with the publisher. The recommendation of the publisher was, well, we needed to achieve the the British English for the a more fast process in the editorial part of UK, and even though with the connection with the externalization that they have, that is the India song, no, and they developed the externalization with the Indian, and in the Indian is more connected with the British English also. Yeah, for
Okay.
these kind of things, we develop these kind of aspects. Yeah.
Here, Yvonne Huertas, our executive director at Ballas, she's saying,
Mhm.
excellent presentation, resourceful, comprehensive, filled with great insights and advice. Congratulations, Nestor. It was a job well done.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. Thank you.
We have a question
You're
from
welcome.
Katerina Kushel. Great presentation of the backstage of a very good and serious journal in Latin America. Would be access the new normal for publishing our research? She's asking.
Yeah. Yeah, for example, this is a good opportunity in general because previously the how can I say the word really I don't know if it is good in English, the satanization, I don't know, of the open access, no, the to see like no open access, you need to pay, and probably the reviewer is poor, and the process is not so well, and is not connected with the community. Well, probably this kind of a fake news, no, from so many years ago was destroyed now. After the, for example, a different kind of agreements, for example, DORA agreement, other kind of dialogues in general around the world regarding to the directory of open access journals, or ROAR, for example, that is connected with ESSN, another kind of aspects. The world is changing, and talk more about what happened with the sharing of our knowledge. Finally, the authors are need to have the power to share this knowledge, and not necessarily the publisher. And sometimes, well, the business model of the publisher will be okay. We need to develop a business model, but if we practically develop with this business model like an open access in general, practically we convert in poor institutions, no, like if we talk about of incomes, but we have an open world. I consider that is a strongly change in the case of the knowledge, and the open access options is more and more increasing in the region and in general in the world. And for the different kind of agreements, and for other parts, the institution and the journal with this kind of decision to open access achieve a very interesting quality levels that have a good opportunity for us.
Well, thank you very much, Nestor. We are arriving at the end of the session. Thank you so much for such a great presentation. So everybody will be able to see it again if they want to, because it's going to be in the YouTube channel. We're going to post it in our website, Ballas website. And also, please follow us on LinkedIn. We'll be announcing the next webinars and all the activities that we have. We have the conference in Sao Paulo in 2024, June 18 to 21st. And we are reviewing the papers right now. And the two next webinars we have one in April and one in May. Both are on teaching cases, dedicated especially to the teaching notes this time. And the first one is going to be with with the Emerging Market Case Studies Journal, and that's the one on April. And the one in June is going to be with the CBCC, the Cladea Ballas Case Consortium, the presentation from them. And so thank you very much and have a good day. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.